Good morning. Welcome to Good Morning America. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy. They're live or on rebroadcast. I've got an interesting show today. The IRS has come out and announced, woohoo, we've collected over $1 billion from high net worth individuals. And some of this makes sense. But the question is, and this is really goes against a lot of their PR or propaganda, how you might term it, is the IRS just going after millionaires? And this is something that has been touted and repeated many times by the mainstream media, by the IRS, and it's I would argue they're going after everybody. So again, how do you protect yourself? How do you know to plan for the future? That's what we're going to be covering today, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. So we're going to kind of dive right into the news, and there's a lot of news. So first one, this is an article I didn't get to yesterday, and still want to. I think it's really important to kind of look at different government models and which direction do we want to go on. So this is an article from the Epic Times. So China has really been exploding its economy for the last couple of decades, and right now their economy is hitting the skids. So they're having a lot of problems, and one of the biggest thoughts here is that they can't innovate. So they can produce more factories, they can shove people in the factories and you know, force people to work, or in many instances, um, and their output has increased as they build their factories, but it's hitting the point where they're saturating markets. They're not improving their efficiency. So this is what some of the big problems here with China. So we're going to dive into the article, and this is by Christopher Balding. So again, it's one of the largest economies in the world. Has produced cutting-edge technology and leads the world. But the biggest problem is innovation. So why are they struggling to this? So what is innovation? What does it really mean? It means to become more productive and efficient. So this is called the growth in total factor productivity. So can we produce more with less? Can we get better at what we're doing and becoming more efficient? Technology and capital allows more efficiency. For example, by introducing robotics, AI helps increase efficiencies. So we're not just doing the same thing that they did back in Ford's day, but we are using technology and improving processes to become more efficient. Um, so again, there are individual firms or sectors that might innovate, but the bigger problem is when the overall economy cannot. So when you had the old Soviet Union or North Korea, you have they're based on very flawed economies or economic models here. So basically, command and control. The government, top down, tells people what they're going to produce, how they're going to do it, and the government's subsidies generate inefficiencies. So a lot of businesses are reliant on subsidies. Sound familiar? We have them in our country too. Instead of focusing on what's best and what the market really needs. So even though they can produce innovative products, it doesn't mean they have an innovative economy. So and even Chinese economists worry about low factor productivity. So most of the growth in China is not from innovation, efficiency, or a higher skilled workforce, which is a huge thing lacking in China, but just more money being poured in by the communist government to prop up these industries that are, they're taking all this money that they have from loaning money and just living off the interest from other countries, United States and others. Um, but they are just pouring this into their own economy. But the problem is, if you have more money, and we're seeing this in our own economy, if you just pour money into the economy without actual real growth and productivity to back that up, you get inflation, you get all kinds of distortions in the economy. Instead of focusing on real growth and encouraging innovation throughout the economy, it doesn't go anywhere. So you have some innovative products, Chinese high-speed rail, operating system to airplanes, all comes from foreign technology. So then they steal or take the information that's out there and then try to build on it. It's advanced and built with enormous subsidies. So instead of becoming more productive with what they have, the Chinese economy relies on centralized planning direction, which creates all the wrong incentives. So, this is typical of communists, or when you have too much government interference and telling people what they should produce and shouldn't produce. So a great example is, Mao Zedong, when he just mandated increased steel production. He said, we want so much steel production. It was ridiculous. There was no way for the current production to meet it. So for different areas to meet this criteria, they built backyard furnaces, melted down household goods to meet the local steel production numbers. So look, they had the numbers, even though it had a zero impact on new steel, as it was just melting existing metal objects, and it was no use for industrial use because it was low quality. So again, they met the numbers, they did what the government asked them to, but with garbage material. So that's typical of what happens when, again, we see it with COVID. Hospitals were given all kinds of money to treat COVID patients, and so then, of course, everybody had COVID all of a sudden. So they had this perverse incentive to label everybody as COVID, every death as COVID. If they had any COVID symptoms, even though they were in a car wreck or shot, and that's what actually killed them, they would label it a COVID death to get more money, cha-ching, cha-ching, from the government. So this is where perverse incentives can really distort the numbers and create a lot more issues than it actually solves. So they did the same thing recently with, they wanted to stimulate semiconductor manufacturing. The government decided this. And then there was a flood in the semiconductor manufacturing. So again, there was a lot of government assistance. Everybody rushed into it to get that assistance. And what happened? Inevitable collapse because there was overproduction, no market for it. And then there's a huge wave of bankruptcies. So, and even the surviving firms still demand large-scale subsidies to stay afloat. So the idea that you can just tell have the government tell the economy, you're going to do this, you're going to do A, B, and C, and it's going to be productive, is has been proven time and time throughout history to be very wrong-headed. So the article continues with some more examples, but we're going to move on to a new it's an old idea, and I really hope this one passes. We're going to come back to that topic of command economies. Bipartisan group of senators reached agreement on bill to ban lawmakers from trading stocks. Now, this is something both parties are very guilty of. Republicans and Democrats. Insider trading, if you or I to do this, it would be illegal. We would be in jail. And the Senate and House of Republicans, people make money. I mean, Nancy Pelosi is one of the more egregious examples. But again, this is both parties. Both parties do this. So when they say a bipartisan group, it's Senator Josh Hawley and 3 Democrats. That's 4. Hopefully they can shame the rest into signing on to something like that, because this creates a lot of perverse incentives for Congress to approve certain things, to do certain things, and then they trade on it. If they know that someone's being reviewed by for a contract Or, again, they do this all the time where they know something's going to happen and they make last minute bets right before a stock goes up, and then they sell and make a ton of money. Again, would be illegal, very illegal for anybody to do, but our legislatures and our representatives of the people do this all the time, and makes for very perverse incentives to approve things that they shouldn't, and allow them, as long as they can make a buck and personally enrich themselves. It's a huge, huge problem. So again, there's a saying going around, and I'm not saying this to say support Trump, but that they would much rather support someone that gave up his fortune to serve rather than someone that made their fortune serving. And so, again, this
Could
really
you
gets
handle
into
more
the
clients?
issue here of,
Silly question. But how do you find
we
those
want
clients?
people going and
Advertise
serving for the right
and just hope
reasons.
for the best. There's a better way. Legal Match is looking for great
So it's a
attorneys to help
modification
hundreds
of
of
an early
thousands of
bill.
clients who trust us to handle their legal matters each year. So if you're a
And
great
then,
attorney, Legal Match will help you
we
get the clients you need.
prohibit,
And Legal Match is
again,
easy to
prohibit members
use.
from selling
Simply
stocks,
review our detailed case interviews quickly, in real time,
or they
and
can
respond to the
buy
cases
stocks
that
or other
match your
covered
practice.
investments.
That's it.
And if they
Don't
have
waste
things
time with clients you
beforehand.
don't
So
want.
Mitt Romney,
Instead, focus on the
I had
clients
plenty
you
of problems
do
with Mitt
want.
Romney, but one
Legal
thing he
Match
did do is he
already
put
has
his money
lots
to a
of
blind
people looking
trust.
for a great attorney in your
Hands
area,
off.
with more coming
not
every
gonna
day.
touch it.
All you have to do
That
is
was a
review
big
their detailed
accusation,
case
and I think,
interviews and aggressively
former
pursue the
President Trump
clients
did
you
the same
want.
thing.
So if you're
Put his
looking for
assets
more
into a blind
clients,
trust. He had
respond
no
now
control
to
over
review
it.
current cases posted on Legal Match in your area.
Again,
Then
that
see if you
is a
have what it
great way
takes
to
to become a
reduce
Legal Match member
corruption.
attorney.
And there was a great quote: Congress should not be here to make a buck.
All right, folks, that sector,
Congress should be here to
taking a
serve the
break, and
people. There's
many
no
are
reason why
pointing
members
to
of
that
Congress ought to
forward
be
PE
profiting off the
ratio,
information that
31
only they
times,
get,
which is huge.
and the rest of the American
Take a
people
look
don't
at
get.
that chart
It's
further
extremely
back.
unfair
This metric goes
and
up
abusive.
55 times
So,
during the dot-com. Of course, nobody rings a bell at tops or
let's see
bottoms,
how far this
but
goes.
the narrative certainly
That's the
have
whole
to be
question.
defended. I want to
We've
bring
had
in
these
Co-Chief
ideas.
Investment Officer
There
Time
are
Investment Management,
people
Emily
trying to do the right thing
Emily,
in both
listen,
parties,
I
but
want to
I think there's
follow
way
up
too
sort of
many
a conversation
people
I just had with Dan.
at the trough.
How concerned are you,
And I
particularly
mean
when it
that,
comes to tech valuations?
and
We
all of
got
its
the top
negative
10 stocks
connotations.
here, and
Too many
if they
politicians
pull back,
feeding off the
would
American
investors,
people,
do you
taking
think,
advantage
get out
of
of the
American
market,
people,
or would they start to
and
rotate
making
and look
these
elsewhere?
insane trades, which hurt consumers,
Yeah,
hurt
Charles, the
businesses,
rotation,
and
I think, is
it's
not
all
there
out there.
yet, and the concentration
Expense
is
of the American
worrisome.
public.
You mentioned earlier
So
about
again,
35% of the index
love
is
to
now
see this
comprised
happen.
of 10
Kudos to
stocks
those
here.
supporting
The
this on the
tech
right and
sector's
the
up
left.
30%. Your prior guest
We've
mentioned
seen
the
similar
S&P
bills
500
and
only up 15%
the House of
year to date.
Representatives,
so a lot
and
of
it
the
does get
returns are
bipartisan
being
support,
driven there. But in
but a
order to
very
actually
small
see
percentage.
some type of leadership shift,
There's
you
a few
need
honest
another
politicians out
catalyst
there, but
other than
not
valuations. There's
nearly
an
enough.
old saying
So
that
we're coming up on another
valuations
break.
just aren't a catalyst. You
And
need to
when we
see a
come back,
regime
we're going to
shift
dive
or the
into
macro
more
environment or the
of
market,
what's happening in the economy.
or the earnings
But this
environment.
idea of the
Tech
command,
earnings have
the
been
top-down
awesome. They were
government telling
up
people what to do,
25%
and
year
how
over
that
year in the first
hurts
quarter. They're
average
penciled in to
taxpayers
be
like
close
you.
to 20% for the rest of the year and into 2025. These companies are higher quality. They've got great balance sheets. They've got tons of cash, and we think that that's an environment that's going to get rewarded in this late cycle regime that we're sitting in today.
So what about the small caps, right? Because interest rates are coming down. That's supposed to be like a sort of a tailwind. And we know they're starting to drift. Everyone's talked. Listen, at the beginning of the year, everyone was kind of saying, hey, look at the small caps. Look at the small caps. Now everyone's kind of like, doing that old whistle through the past the graveyard thing. Or would you look there at all?
Yeah, Charles, I would say our most out of consensus view has been to underweight small cap equities. And you're right, the narrative and everybody coming on your show talking about the fact that interest rates coming down are going to benefit small cap equities. But we have to remember that rates are potentially coming down because inflation's slowing. And inflation was great for corporate profits. It resulted in record revenue growth during the height of the pandemic. And that's starting to come down at the same time that the cost of capital is elevated in the face of higher for longer. So what's happening now is companies are contending with margin pressure. And if you're a company that wants to maintain your profitability and your margins are shrinking, you have to cut costs or have a lot of pricing power. Those companies that have the best pricing power have been found in those quality indices tech companies in particular, small cap companies, they're lower quality. 45% of the Russell 2000 index is comprised of unprofitable companies.
Right.
The debt that's coming due is significant. You're better to wait for an early cycle environment to overweight small cap stocks.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe also look, the S&P 600 might be a better alternative as well. Emily, thank you so much. Have a fantastic weekend.
Same to you.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm going to jump to another article here. This one also from Fox Business, and this one is talking about what's happening with the new generation, Gen Zs, out there trying to make their way in the world. So again, nearly half of Gen Z are relying on financial help from parents, family. This is based on a survey from Bank of America. So when you include friends and the government, it goes over 50%. So just going over the survey, 46% are receiving financial assistance. But when you go to just non-students, people that are already in the workplace, it drops down to 30%. So I mean, that kind of makes sense. That if you're out there in the workplace and you're earning money rather than being at school, that you're relying on your family. But I think the number of parents paying for student loans, paying for residences has gone up. So Holly Neal, president of BofA, she says that maybe I'm biased because I have 3 Gen Zs I'm trying to make independent. That's expensive. But they're setting a budget. They're living up to that budget. So she's helping them follow and learn good financial habits. And so again, when you look at government assistance as well, the number climbs to 54%. And that's all Gen Zs. If you talk about students, the number's probably much higher. 32% get $1,000 or more, while 44% get less than $500 per month. So something to help them out. So if they're non-students, they tend to get a lot less. So 22% they're getting more than $100,000 a month, and 55 said they get less than 500 if they're getting any aid at all. So most of these items, groceries and toiletries, 57%, rent and utilities, 53%, phone plans, health insurance payments. Again, those are some of the biggest costs out there. And it's tough. You get out there and you have a new job. If it doesn't have benefits, it is tough to be out there trying to make it in this economy. So more than half of Gen Z don't make enough money to live due to the high cost of living. And at that age, I mean, you should still be living on a shoestring, figure things out, but making wise decisions to plan for your future. 43% reported cutting back on dining out, 27 passed up on events with friends, 24% switched to more affordable grocery stores, and 21% started using a budget. Love to see this number go higher. Started using a budget. And so just go through the numbers. Best thing you can do for the next generation is teach them financial literacy. Help them learn how to get on their feet. And this next article really highlights why. So when Elon Musk took over Twitter and fired a huge portion of the employees, he was sued for all kinds of reasons. They're saying they were due severance. Elon Musk fought it in the courts, and just recently won dismissal of this lawsuit. Now he's got plenty of other lawsuits that they're coming after him. Namely his salary, that his what he paid himself was way over the top. So, but this is a judge in San Francisco of all places, that the Employee Retirement Income Security Act didn't cover former employees' claims, and she couldn't hear the case. So he's one of many accusing him of reneging on promises, and again, this happened October 22. There's still going to be plenty of litigation going on about this, but you never know what's going to happen if you're going to lose your job. Life throws all kinds of curveballs for you. I mean, we just had our AC go out, and that's a $10,000 to $15,000 fix. So having a plan in place, having emergency savings built up is absolutely key to surviving the ebb and flow and what happens in life. So didn't want to dive too much into that. The next article I think is very interesting. So we just had the far left take over in France. They have a plurality, so they still have to. So they're the largest party in the government right now, but they still have to work with other countries. They don't have a majority, so they can't just. They have to work with other parties. Sorry, they can't just shove through whatever they want. But one of the first things they're being pushed is a 90% tax on the wealthy. So again, France is beautiful. If you've never visited, you should go visit. It's amazing. But apparently, visit, don't stay. So they're planning to implement a 90% tax on the rich. So what are the rich going to do? They're going to leave. Bye-bye. 90%. Especially when you have Switzerland right next door with huge, very, very low taxes. You already have issues with, soccer clubs and professional sports athletes going elsewhere, not wanting to play in France. So the repercussions, you just need the opponents of this law just need to talk about how it's going to destroy French soccer, and they might overturn this. Because this has happened before. PSG was actually, which is the main team in Paris, suffering for quite a few years due to this same issue that they couldn't bring on top talent because it was just too expensive. So, the center-left party under Macron worked with or collaborated with the New Popular Front. Nothing illegal, but it was a little bit tricksy here to defeat Marine Le Pen's right-wing party. So the left wing got the majority of seats as a result, and now things are lurching to the left. So because they're the main party, They have the largest party in their parliament. They're insistent that their left-wing ideas will be implemented. We are prepared to govern, to apply the program, which is ours. So we're going to see a lot of big changes there, and it's going to be interesting to see and watch what happens in France. Now, within the far right, again, there's plenty of concerns about the far right too, but I think they've moderated over the years, especially in France. But again, we have, a 90% tax rate is just nuts. Last time we had something that high was World War II, or from World War II. And the only reason it made sense is because there were lots of loopholes. People found all kinds of ways around it. But again, if you go to 90% tax, watch people flee France, flee to other countries, and that's where you just kill productivity. Moving to our own country here, this is an article that came out today. So here's the original news post that came out this morning. The IRS is very proud of itself. It tops $1 billion in past due collections from millionaires. So they say they topped $1 billion, but they don't say what the collections were last year. But they're just pounding their chest and putting out this notice. We targeted the rich and got $1 billion. And are there plenty of people that should have paid more? I'm sure there were. I'm absolutely sure that there were. Are there people that are having trouble fighting the IRS, and the IRS is just becoming more ridiculous than ever? That's what I'm seeing. I just had a case where I called the IRS. This is the case. We've been fighting the IRS for 3 years on this case. It was a grandmother that claimed her granddaughter because the granddaughter was living with her, and the IRS is demanding proof. They want proof. They want a letter from somebody, the school, immunizations, something saying, here's her address. And, they want a smoking gun to show that, look, that the baby, the child lived with the grandmother. At the time, the child was only 1 year old. So what they're asking for is very ridiculous. We're seeing this time and time again in audits, in collections, that the IRS is demanding more and more documents. They are rejecting things faster and quicker. A lot of these collections, and this kind of gets my goat here, it's not from we're treating people fairly. They're running roughshod over people's rights. They're treating taxpayers. They're making things a lot harder for taxpayers across the board. And if you think they're only doing that to millionaires, I've got a bridge to sell you. So again, if I get a little keyed up, it's because I see this day in and day out. I see them hurt all kinds of people, individuals. So they're announcing this. This is their PR. Look how great this is. We're using the Inflation Reduction Act money to go after the wealthiest and punish them. Some of the ways that they're claiming they're going after them: abusive use of partnerships, activities involving large corporations and partnerships, and so they're opening examinations of the 76 of the larger partnerships in the U.S. So it doesn't matter if there was any failure here. If they had anything, they're just examining. So all of the larger partnerships are just getting examined by the U.S. government. Aircraft use. So they're going to begin dozens of audits involving personal use of business aircraft. Is there potential for abuse? Sure. But what I'm seeing, and one of the interesting things here, they are not, and it might be in one of the other articles. Let me jump to the next article. So there's plenty of news sources pick this up. They're talking about this. And they're looking to expand this. So anybody with more than $250,000 in recognized tax debt, they're going after them. They're being very aggressive here. Can you get relief? Yes. Is it going to be easy? No. So when I talk to not just millionaires, but when I'm talking to average Americans, the IRS has made it harder than ever to stay in a non-collectible status, to actually get into one, to argue for an installment agreement. They have reduced the flexibility and created more layers of bureaucratic inefficiency within their system. True story. I can't tell you how. Talking to their collections department, which used to be kind of like that was the main unit, handled all the top cases. There really wasn't another collections department beyond them, and that's where you would get your better representatives, the most informed people, and you could get the most done. They have now created another layer of bureaucracy called special compliance, which we don't even know why things are being sent to them. They're harder to get through to than ACS or collections. There's less oversight. There's less communication from them. And when I talk to people in collections, I'm like, well, why is this happening? And they don't know. They're shaking their head. Anybody that's been there for any length of time and wondering, same as us. They say, look, it doesn't make sense. I don't understand it either. But top brass will do what they want. And unfortunately, this is what is happening. They are even making it harder. So if you're talking to collections, you can't get transcripts from them anymore. You have to talk to the first layers of people first, request any transcripts, and then go talk to collections. So if you go to collections first and need transcripts, they need to transfer you to somebody else and then get the transcripts. And everybody knows how bad and horrible the hold time is at the IRS. So again, it's just layer upon layer of inefficiency, making it harder for people. So the IRS is still trying to do their victory lap here. Oh, look, we got $1 billion more for millionaires. I do think they could be more consistent. I do think there are people that abuse the system. One of the concern here is, and they're claiming it's difference is night and day. Now we're really going after people. But they don't give recent numbers for a comparison. And this is a comment that I think is really perverse. Our goal is always to eliminate the risk of a zero balance due audit, Warfel said on the press call about the agency's reports. So how are they eliminating the risk of a zero balance due audit? And I've had audits where, again, the IRS doesn't have the full story when they start auditing. They're questioning things and their expenses. Doesn't mean they're wrong. The IRS just wants more information. They want you to prove it up. Now, there are times where someone is very guilty in audits, and I've been there too, where the client really did mess up, claimed things incorrectly, etc. But the idea that you have the commissioner telling the staff and pushing this idea that they do not want zero balance due audits is very unfair to taxpayers. And I'll tell you why. It creates this expectation for auditors going in that there's going to be a balance due. So how do they achieve that? They reject proof. They stymie taxpayers. And I've had the same proof provided 3 different times in another case. And the IRS is still claiming we didn't get it, you need to resend it. I had someone just the other day call, and he's working with a different company trying to finish up an offer in compromise. This was yesterday, I was talking to him. And he said, look, they're asking for the same thing. I've sent it 3 times. How many times do I have to send it? Like, well, you literally have to shove it down their throats. You have to fax it, you have to mail it, you have to call and confirm that they've got it. You have to make it so they have no excuses anymore. That is how aggressive we have had to get with the IRS. Pretty much have to grab them by the lapels, shove your information down their throat, and then follow up with them and make sure that they do it. And they become less responsive than ever. So, and audits are notoriously bad for this, for taking forever to respond, coming back, oh, well, you never sent us information. Yes, we did. Here it is again for the umpteenth time. it was just 2 days ago that I talked to the gentleman and with the child, they're demanding the grandmother's name and address on a piece of paper with a 1 year old baby. 1 year old baby isn't going, they go to the hospital, they have their immunization records, whatever. But on none of the records did they put the address because they didn't need to. So that's the crazy part. They're demanding information going all the way back to 2018 in that case. So they have to dig up this information going that far back. It's ridiculous. So, the article just kind of wraps up there. And when we come back, we're going to talk about ways to beat the system. How do you still get your rights protected, even though the IRS is getting more and more extreme? There are ways to do it, and I mentioned some of them. But again, if it makes it harder for people to do this on their own, it absolutely does. So that's the crazy thing is that protect your rights, know what your rights are, and then from there you can make sure that you and your family are taken care of here. And that really is what matters, that you and your family get your rights respected. You do still have rights. But again, the IRS right now, be very aware that they're doing everything they can to collect money, and not respect your rights. So we're going to wrap this up after this next break and continue talking about this. Welcome back, everybody. And just making a few quick notes as to how to protect yourself, how to deal with an IRS that's a little bit crazier than ever. Because to be honest, everybody says we'll wait for the next election and things will improve. You might get a new IRS commissioner, but you're going to have a lot of the same people in place. So just because you have a new election doesn't mean things are going to change right away. Sorry to burst people's bubble. It takes time to retrain people to actually be public servants instead of to be as aggressive as possible and just go after people and treat taxpayers as criminals. That is the mindset among way too many newly trained IRS revenue or employees. And I have taxpayers complain about that all the time. So I've got 5 things that I'm going to cover. How to protect yourself. And these are things that I've covered in depth in other videos. But first of all, know your rights. Best place to go and see what your rights are is the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Publication 1, put up by the IRS. If you go to irs.gov and type in their search Publication 1, it will come right up. So we've gone through that in past episodes and just walked through those rights in depth and detail. Number 2, get good advice. So talk to an experienced tax professional, talk to a couple. You should feel them out. Does this guy, if I'm just calling and talking to a slick salesman, get off the call. If they're not actually giving me good information and advice when it comes to the IRS, call someone else. Ask to speak to an attorney. If you're just talking to a salesperson, they don't really know, and they don't deal with the IRS day in and day out. So know your rights, and also when you're talking to people, you should find out what your options are and how likely those options are. So people ask me all the time, what percentage do you think? What's the probability? And legally, I can't tell them, 80%, 90%. I can make a guesstimate, but I have to qualify that like crazy. But if I don't feel comfortable about an offer, we don't sell. And that's an offer in compromise. It's one of those things, and I talked to someone just the other day, a former client, they would have qualified for an offer. They didn't the first time around. We put them in a non-collectible status for 2 years because they had just recently become unemployed. After 2 years, she was a realtor. She didn't have any money when we did the first negotiation. She said, I did get one piece of money. I'm like, well, what did you do with it? She owes about $20,000 in taxes, and she paid off a high interest credit card that was at 30%. and it was about $20,000. So instead of paying off the IRS, she paid off her credit card. Not the end of the world. We can still help her out, but she's not going to qualify for an offer compromise. And the IRS is getting more aggressive than ever when it comes to offering compromises. So right now, we're not accepting people or for offering compromises unless they don't have any asset issues, if they don't have any questionable items. I used to be able to push through and argue things with them. But again, the IRS is being more aggressive than ever in rejecting offering compromises across the board. For little old retirees, people that are flat broke, people that are making some money but are solidly in the middle class still, it's across the board. So this idea that the IRS is just targeting the rich, sorry, big fat lie. So first, taxpayer bill of rights, know your rights. Second, talk to experts and get your options. If someone doesn't lay out your options and you make a choice, talk to somebody else. So I would recommend talking to at least 2, if not 3 different firms to get your rights and options. And again, if you're getting a high pressure sale, it's probably not the right company. They're not trying to do the right thing by you. They're just trying to make a buck. Number 3, get your records together. Make sure your information is clear and correct. So get a good CPA, get a good bookkeeper. It's very important that you have good record keeping. And one of the biggest mistakes people make for small companies and even large companies, I've seen cases in the millions of dollars where people are using their business account as their personal piggy bank and running personal expenses through their business account. Horrible idea, wrong way to go, and really just can cause a lot of problems with the IRS. So be financially disciplined. Listen to the advice of your CPAs, bookkeepers, and if they're not giving you good advice like this, find someone else. And if you need a reference to a good CPA or bookkeeper, we do that all day long. We refer people out to excellent companies that will take care of you. So good record keeping is absolutely key. And if you don't have good record keeping going backwards, guess what? As long as you kept your information separate, and even then we can go back through and parse together and put something together for you, as long as you have your older bank statements. So there are plenty of people that's what they do, and they'll go through and they'll rebuild the profit and loss. They'll look at the information you have when you don't have good numbers, but ideally develop those good habits now, and they will absolutely help you in the future. Consistency with the IRS. So dealing with the IRS most of the time is like riding a bull. There are certain things that are very easy to do. If you just want to set up a payment plan, you just want to pay it off, that's something most people can do on your own. If you feel intimidated by it, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, don't do it. And there are plenty of people that call into the IRS, and I'm backtracking a little bit about using or getting a good advice. I'm going to cover this actually in the next section. So you have to be consistent with the IRS. You have to follow up with them. If you're requesting transcripts, if you don't get it, you have to follow up with them. And you have to stay on top of them to get that. Lately, they'll just mail them to you. If you can set up an account through irs.gov, that's the easiest and quickest way to get them. You can't always get them, though. Sometimes they're not available, so you have to call and request them. And the best number to call is 1-800-829-1040. Best time to call, later in the evening. So be aware of this, because I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone tell me a CPA wrote a letter to the IRS and just mailed it. 9 times out of 10, that letter just goes in a big black hole where the IRS does who knows what with most correspondence. If it doesn't fit in one of their neat little boxes, 9 times out of 10, they just ignore it and trash it. Again, wonderful customer service. Whatever's submitted to the IRS, if you send tax returns, you have to follow up to make sure that they got them and processed them correctly. We have to do this on every case because I can't tell you. I just talked to someone else and they've submitted their tax returns 3 times and the IRS kept losing them. I'm like, how in the world do I get them to actually accept this? There are ways. You can actually fax it in directly to them. But however you submit it, you have to call, you have to follow up with them, make sure this is taken care of. And in the meantime, you have to set up something to stop and prevent any kind of collection activity if you have a balance due. So even though you're waiting on the IRS to do their job, you still have to protect your account. The hold times are shorter than ever. We're talking 3 to 7 days in most cases lately. And that's just in the last few months that has changed. It's just the IRS getting stricter and stricter. Who knows if they're going to get better with after the election. A new administration is going to take over anyway till January. That'll be probably another year before they get their people in place if it's a different administration. So, in the short term, you just have to be consistent. You have to follow up. You have to bug them. One of the big things here, number 5, don't take what the IRS tells you at face value. This one does upset me. The IRS gives out bad information all the time. If you're talking to ACS, information should be better, but even then, they give out bad information all the time. Classic example is telling people they have to file 10 years of returns. If you talk to the lower levels of the IRS, they'll tell you that all day long, and they're wrong. Absolutely wrong. I have faxed the IRS citation to the IRS saying, here's a citation saying that you're wrong, you don't know what you're doing. Stop telling people this. I was doing a seminar once and I was interrupted. I was doing the seminar with an IRS manager and regional manager, but they weren't in collections, so they didn't know. And I shared the 6-year rule. They both came on the stage, interrupted me, and claimed it was 10 years. And I was like, that was rude. I just told the audience, look, if you want the IRM citation that says 6 years, come to me afterwards and I'll provide it to you. And so one of the things that when people call in, they're going to tell you installment agreement, you have to pay, how soon can you pay, or we're going to levy lien. They're going to, now there's exceptions. There are people that are great that don't play by this, but all of the new employees are being trained to act like this. And this is something typical over the years. They will try to pressure you into believing that you have to pay now. You have to set something up to set up an installment agreement, or you have to pay a big chunk. They'll pay people, send letters all the time, and they'll tell people, well, you need to pay so much by this date. And it's only when you're like, there's no way I can do this, that they might say, okay, well, we can set up a payment plan, I can't tell you how many times I've called the IRS. I'm calling, so-and-so, here's the social, here's the name. And they'll just go into it without asking if I'm the power of attorney. And they say, oh, well, you've got to pay right now. I'm like, well, what if I can't afford it? Well, then you have to provide all this proof and you've got to mail it in. And it's like, well, what if I have the financial numbers right here, right now, to go over with you on the phone? And 9 times out of 10, you can do it right then on the phone. I had one case, and this is a long time ago, where someone, just a young couple, they had a young kid, they were struggling. They didn't have a lot for my fees. I said, look, I'll do you a favor. Pay me $250. We'll go to the park. Your kids can run around. We'll call the IRS right here, right now. And within an hour, their case was done. Still had to follow up and confirm it because you can't trust the IRS as far as you can throw them. But within an hour, I had their case done. Just had to call back and confirm it after 2 to 3 weeks. And that was it. Usually it takes a lot more work than that, but they had everything lined up. So when the IRS tells you something, this is why it's so important. Run it by a tax professional. Look it up. There are times that people are just plain wrong. But there's a lot of time the IRS gives bad information, or they give you half the picture. They don't share with you your full rights and options. And so understanding how to protect yourself as you go through the process is absolutely key. So just to go over these 5 things. 1, know your rights. 2, talk to an experienced professional and get multiple opinions. 3, get a good CPA, bookkeeper, know what's going on. Don't just sign a tax return because someone completed it and shoved it in front of you. True story. I just had for 23, I've got my 23 return on an extension, and the CPA just said, I don't think they looked it over, and they were going to report that I made $600,000 in income last year. I wish, didn't make nearly that much, but someone didn't include all my business expenses, which is a huge issue. So, I didn't cite it, like, hey, I need to talk to somebody. So I responded, sent a message, hey, please get back to me. What's going on here? So don't, even with your CPAs, sit down, talk to them, develop a relationship. If they're not teaching you through the process, either you need to be asking questions or you need to get someone that will help you become more aware of your financial responsibilities, because it's becoming tougher. And the big thing there is making quarterly estimated tax payments. With that is having good information. And part of that is making sure you have your transcripts, that you go directly to the source and find out what the IRS is saying, so that way you can contest it. One of the things I want to backtrack a little bit to having a good experienced professional is knowing when the IRS is full of baloney. And having someone that can answer your questions and guide you through the process. So you can just run through it real quick. Know your rights, taxpayer bill of rights. Have an experienced tax professional help you and guide you through the process. Get a good CPA, bookkeeper. Consistency. You have to follow up, follow up, follow up. Don't trust the IRS as far as you can throw it. And lastly, don't accept what the IRS says at face value. Confirm it, verify it, because a lot of times they're wrong. So again, I hope this is helpful, especially if you plan on dealing with the IRS on your own or you have a tax issue. We give people free advice all the time. And if we can't help them, we tell them, look, this is why we can't help you, or don't recommend an offer in compromise. We'll be straight with you. So if you have questions, give us a call at 520-485-7371, or you can reach out to us through our website at guardiantaxlaw.com. And I wish you have a productive, wonderful day out there, and take care for you and your family.